Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya headquarters. And these are our top stories. Trump issues a warning to Russia. 100% secondary tariffs in 50 days if no Ukraine deal is reached. A possible breakthrough in Gaza ceasefire talks as President Trump voices hope for a deal within days. But sources accuse Netanyahu of stalling the process. And reports emerged that Iran's president was injured during an Israeli strike last month targeting a secret underground facility in Tehran. US President Donald Trump has just delivered his long-awaited statement on the Ukrainian war during a meeting with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the White House. Trump threatened 100% secondary tariffs on Russia if no peace deal is reached within 50 days. He also called it Biden's war and voiced disappointment in Putin. He announced new weapons and a deal that would be with Europe footing the bill. Take a listen to what he had to say.
As you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine, and would like to see it end. It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. It's not my war, I'm trying to get you out of it. And we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And we make the best equipment, the best missiles, the best of everything. The European nations know that. And we've made a deal today, and I'm going to have Mark speak about it, but we've made a deal today where we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Arabiya editor Wissam Keyrouz and the managing director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, here with me in the studio. Wissam, we'll pass to you first in Riyadh. What do you make of this latest move by Trump? Do you think this is necessary to get Putin to finally agree to a deal?
It is very difficult to anticipate any kind of action from Putin because Putin doesn't seem to be feeling a lot of pressure, honestly. But it would be interesting also to see how Trump is starting to use the tariffs as a weapon for everything, for countries who disrespect him or for countries who will not show enough will to make deals with him. So one weapon for all, which is the tariffs. Now, the big question that we have to ask, why is Russia so reluctant to give Trump back after being the one American president who gave Russia and Putin almost a lot or everything? We know that Trump gave the fact that Crimea would somehow be Russian, that a lot of the territory seized by Russia would somehow remain outside of Kyiv's power. Now, what does Russia want? Apparently, Russia and Putin knows that Trump cannot become Joe Biden. And we just heard Trump saying, remember, this is not my war. And I want to stop and listen again to this word when he say, remember, this is not my war, it's Joe Biden's war. So in Trump's core values, he does not believe that, he doesn't really care about what's happening in Ukraine, but he cares about his promise, about his ego, about the fact that he promised the world that he will bring an end to this. And he also kind of promised himself with a Nobel Peace Prize. So this is very important. Now, Putin is not giving Trump any relief. So yes, Trump is upset. Yes, Trump is hiring the tone, but we are yet to see any real content in the big and rough words that Trump is using against Putin.
Michael, what do you think? Is this going to put pressure on Putin now? Do you think these tariffs will actually be somewhat of a deterrent?
I don't think that tariffs will be a deterrent. I'll be interested to see what the White House can do, because this should be an opportunity for them. You know, they have not had any victories in the nearly 180 days they've been in office. They've got the war in the Ukraine, the war in Gaza, the tariffs are a mess, and they've had to bomb Iran. And I think if I was in the White House right now, I would want this to be an opportunity where we could use diplomacy. We could actually speak to Putin, find out what it is that what's the long game? And the issue, though, that the White House faces is that because they haven't had any diplomatic wins in the time that they've been in office, I think that they have nothing to point to say, this is the way that we have to do it. These are the people that can help us get there. And I think that Donald Trump is left to issue ultimatums. And when you're trying to enter high-stakes diplomacy with someone like Vladimir Putin, demanding deadlines be met within 50 days is not the way to go.
But possibly a strategic 50-day mark, because timing is everything, and that has been the case with this administration. September the 2nd would be 50 days from now. Labour Day is on the 1st of September. And in the off-year elections, they'll be on the 4th of November as well. So possibly strategically timed. And he's always said it's been a long game, getting NATO just to go to the negotiating table and to pay for these weapons. Is that somewhat of a win?
So I think getting NATO to pay is a win, but I think that the idea came from NATO. I don't think this was Donald Trump who floated this idea. I think the European leaders came together, they developed this strategy, and this is the one that's presented. And all they needed to do, because they know how to operate with Donald Trump, is to say to him, this is an easy win. It'll be a business deal. You won't be paying for it. We'll be paying for it, but we'll be able to give the Ukrainians what we want.
Wissam, is this somewhat of potentially, well, because where is Europe in this situation now? And we've heard it mentioned a few times today as well, and Europe in somewhat involved in the payment of this, or the EU at least. Where does this leave Europe at the moment?
Well, Europe have been in not a so good shape for the last couple of years. The one prominent thing that we have seen in the last days was the Franco-UK agreement on somehow sharing the nuclear deterrence umbrella. This is a game changer. Although Paris and London said it's not against Russia, but we only can see the Russian element in the background of the new thinking in Paris and London. Now, Trump, he says he will be sending new weapons, but he will say he will bring them through the NATO, and that the NATO and Europe obviously will pay for them, and Ukraine as well. And at the same time, we are yet to see what is the nature of these weapons. So now, yes, America is frustrated. They have a real problem in leverage, the leverage over Putin, because Trump, most and foremost, he doesn't want two things. He doesn't want to become Joe Biden. He doesn't want to become the person who is deep involved in this war, who he didn't choose. And second, he will not use any kind of decisive and assertive power, the likes of what we saw in Iran in this conflict, because this is so dangerous. It could start a new world war. And most importantly, it could involve America in a war that is not really wanted, not only by Trump, but mostly by its core electorate, the people who believe that America should be somehow isolationist and not get involved in this. So, yes, Trump is trying to put more pressure, but Putin says that, knows that, I mean, this he can take this further. Now, what does Putin want? This is the big question. Is America ready to give them what he wants? This is also another question. 50 days, 2nd of September. Thank you, Michael, for this precise date. We'll be seeing it's not the first deadline that has been set by the Trump administration. And it would be very important if we have a deal. Let's not forget there is also the rare earth deal that is in the making in Ukraine. A lot of things happening. And also we are yet to hear about something happening in the Middle East, about Gaza. So some kind of a bigger world picture is taking shape in the next week. It could, in the best case scenario, have Trump being triumphant and have all his deals, all his victories, and yet again be triumphant, or nothing at all, like it has been the case for the last 3 or 4 months.
As you said, Wissam, what does Putin want? I mean, I think that's one of the big questions that we are facing right now. Michael, any insight? Because I don't know if this is the million-dollar question right now. What does Putin want?
I think we have to determine what somebody wants by their actions. And you can see his actions are very strategic on the battlefield. He wants as much of the Ukrainian territory as possible, even if that is so that he can be in a better position when it comes time to negotiate. We know he wants the Crimea. We know he does not want NATO in the Ukraine. And we know that he wants to be in a position where he can say, if you want me to come to the negotiating table, then I'm going to give a little bit of what I've taken. But for him to give up everything, he would then be in a position where maybe he can get other concessions from the Europeans and from Donald Trump.
Indeed, and it's a constantly evolving story, but we will move on for now. Michael and Wissam, thank you so much. To this next story, US President Donald Trump has expressed hope that a breakthrough is possible soon in the stalled Gaza ceasefire and hostage negotiations. However, sources say Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is deliberately delaying progress to keep political pressure off himself. Netanyahu insists the war must continue until Hamas is fully disarmed and all hostages are returned. And meanwhile, US envoy Steve Witkoff remains optimistic as talks continue behind the scenes. Wissam, Trump saying he's very hopeful for a Gaza ceasefire within a week, apparently. But is there any real actual indication in Israel that it's on the cards? Are we looking at more political optimism once again here?
We have been very close to this moment many times before. We have been hearing that a deal is possible within days. We heard this at least 5 times before, and it didn't happen. Now, do we have elements that make us believe that this time is different? Maybe, not sure. And also because a lot of things are happening at the same time, and also because we had this meeting in the White House between Netanyahu and Trump. Now, is he deliberately, like you were saying in your presentation, delaying this because of his internal struggles and problems? I really don't believe so, because Netanyahu, whether some like it or not, he is in his most triumphant days ever. He has led what he can sell to his internal audience as a victory over Iran. He is really the one Israeli prime minister that has made changes to the surrounding world where Israel is existing more than any other one. So yes, now there is one last thing, and he has enough leverage over Washington and over the ground in Gaza to be able to do things that are decisive, that will last. Obviously, being able to change the reality in Gaza and get rid of 2 million people inside, that was always a fantasy, a geopolitical fantasy that will not happen. But I think he is about to be able to sell his audience that we have changed the situation in Gaza forever. And if Hamas is able to give them it, whoever is in charge, he will be able to make a deal.
And that does depend on how long this goes on. Surely you think Netanyahu's best interest is to keep this war going as long as possible. When it is done, this man may be on trial for what has happened thus far. Surely it's in his best interest to continue it for as long as possible.
I mean, for a lot of people outside of Israel, especially in the Middle East, they don't really understand this duality of reality between the achievements of Benjamin Netanyahu for his agenda and the fact that he has problems with the judiciary. And let's not forget that just after Iran, the popularity of Netanyahu is at all-time high. Of course, the internal dynamics of Israel remain one of somehow democratic country, and they have internal dynamics. But I don't think, he could delay the war, not because of his problems. Of course, it's a reality for him, and he has to deal with this. But delaying the war because there is not enough will from whoever has will to stop it, and because every day this war continues, he will make it more hard for anyone to continue with the old system in Gaza. So Gaza is, unfortunately for the civilian population, is a much, much harder place to live. And Israel, I'm sure they will make sure that whatever reality is coming out of this will be sustainably changed.
Michael, Netanyahu, I guess, trying any sort of a ceasefire for the return of the remaining hostages at the moment. Is that realistic, do you think, at this point? What about this idea as well of the buffer zone, which we'll talk about with both yourself and Wissam in a second? But the hostages is the key crux here.
It is the key crux, and it's key for both sides. And this is where the art of negotiating would come into play, because you have Hamas, who is adamant that they are not going to give up hostages without certain conditions, and you have the Israelis, who are saying we need the hostages, both the dead as well as the living, and there are certain things that we will want and certain things that we will not give up. How this plays out and what ends up happening in the long run is what is going to, I think, make for an incredibly interesting story as this progresses.
And I think it's because there's obviously some of these non-negotiables, and what we're hearing from this buffer zone and 1/3 of the strip being occupied as well, is that really likely to wash with Hamas? I mean, that's 1.8 kilometres of a buffer zone, and then 1/3 of the Gaza Strip being occupied by Israel. Really, are we likely to see any sort of a deal because of that?
So this is one of the really tricky parts of it, where you cannot see Hamas and the Palestinians wanting to cede any more of their territory. You understand the Israelis and why this makes perfect sense. You also could understand why Hamas would accept it if it meant that there was complete withdrawal of the IDF from that territory. But Israel wants the buffer, and they also want to keep the IDF there. They also want to push 600,000 Palestinians into this humanitarian city. And as that progresses, at what point does Hamas say, wait a second, what is it that we're getting out of it? You want all of that, and you want the hostages, and you want us to give up civil control as well as give up our arms. For Hamas to give up all of that, the Israelis are going to have to give them something. And that's where I think it becomes an incredibly interesting debate that'll go on.
And again, we're hearing as well about this humanitarian city that's also going to be formed there. And earlier I spoke to reporter Blake Sifton, who was in Tel Aviv, about the reaction to Israel's plan for this so-called humanitarian city in Rafah. Here's what he said.
So this suggestion of establishing this humanitarian city, it's been called for by the far right. It's been openly espoused and advocated by the Defense Minister Katz. However, it has been met with condemnation, certainly internationally, and also within some quarters in Israel. Within Israel, opposition leader Yair Lapid has called it crazy. He has said that it basically thwarts the likelihood of any negotiations being successful, and has said that it is essentially Netanyahu pandering to the far right. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert went a step further. He said this idea, the suggestion of forcibly displacing the population of Gaza amounts to ethnic cleansing, and if established, this humanitarian city would be a concentration camp. So very strong words from a former Israeli leader there. The Israeli military has reportedly told the government that establishing this city would take over a year and cost billions. And according to reports, Netanyahu reacted angrily to that, asking that it be made possible much more quickly and much more cheaply.
A humanitarian city, Wissam, it's certainly something, food for thought, I guess, plus this buffer zone, 1/3 occupancy. What do you think of Hamas and what they'll react to with this?
I would say, first and foremost, that the big dramatic reality of this struggle there is that there is no logical sense. I mean, whatever logical sense that can be applied anywhere else does not apply with such deeply ideological players, and especially Hamas. So having seen all this destruction who has been inflicted on civilian population is not enough for an ideological organization like Hamas to shift strategy or to shift policies. So all this human suffering, all this, although it is being inflicted by Israel, we are not really forgetting this, but this is not enough apparently for Hamas to shift strategy and to change tactics. And the people who are paying the price. Now, a humanitarian city, it is a very euphemization of a very harder reality. And if we have one prominent Israeli ex-prime minister saying it amounts to what could be counted as a concentration camp, this is really something, I mean, strong words, yes, but it is also real. Because when you get people who are displaced from their livelihoods, from their homes, and you have new realities on the ground, and you have people being driven into a new place where they will find new livelihood, this is This is really, changing the demography. This is something that hasn't been done any time after World War II, and it will have a huge price. But let's not forget that 60 to 65% of homes in Gaza are not anymore able to receive their real people. So yes, there have to be some changes, some real infrastructure, some real investment in making a new life for those people. And I suspect that it's not Israel who is willing to do this. Israel is willing to do what will change permanently the situation and the game in Gaza.
And I think what the important thing is right now, and I think globally it's agreed that the aid issue, and currently the aid not getting in there, but even when aid does get in, as we saw today, Michael, it can have disastrous consequences.
Yeah, one of the issues that I struggle with, the Israelis will say that Hamas will capture all of the aid and that they will then use it for their own purposes. If you were to flood all of Gaza with as much aid as possible, then you take away Hamas's power to use that as a leverage. And instead of doing just that, the Israelis, they go in with a few trucks instead of the hundreds of trucks that they should be doing every day, because then it becomes a non-issue. Everybody has it, and there's no more fighting over it, and you're able to take away one of those leverages that Hamas controls.
Surely harrowing to see this as well, and these are people who are making their way for water and basic supplies today, being killed because they're trying to get to aid. It's harrowing.
And it's so difficult to not be cynical about it when you see that the instruction is given that if you want the aid, then you have to go to one location. And then when people do go to that one location, they end up, it feels like, that they're targeted. And that's where they are then killed by the Israeli military. And again, the Israeli military, the IDF will come out and say it was an accident or there's an investigation. But it's something that they've said repeatedly over the course of this war. And there is no accountability because they are the ones that are committing the crime, and then they are the ones that are investigating it themselves. And nobody seems to stand up to the Israeli military to say, this has got to stop, and this is at an end.
And we're seeing, and this is very much sideline, literally, conversations that are taking place between Steve Witkoff meeting the Qataris once again, but this time on the sideline of a football match, which is an unusual place for mediation to be taking place on such a serious matter, but that's exactly what's happening.
Well, it's not the place that you would think that it would be happening normally, but I think with the Trump administration, I think we've seen that they are maybe unconventional in the way that they do things. I don't know that I would want to criticize them too much for this, because anytime you get parties coming together to talk in any location is a good thing. And you just think maybe 3 or 6 months from now, the war could be over, and maybe that crucial conversation took place at a football match in New Jersey.
We hope so. Before we wrap this up, final words from you on this, Wissam?
It is unbelievable how much the world's attention is living fatigue in front of this misery in Gaza. I mean, this has been going on for so long, and the only force that is not living any real fatigue, and this is very impressive, is the Israeli military machine. At the same time, people in Gaza have been showing the world one of the worst tragedies that the world has seen. And the fatigue is so obvious that people are not reacting enough to this misery. Not only the people in the world, but also people in Hamas as well, inside Gaza, who does not seem to do whatever it takes to stop this and still calculating of their political survival.
Wissam, Michael, thank you both for your thoughts on that. Let's move on. South Korea is deciding whether to accept the US demands for its reduced barriers on agricultural imports. It's part of the efforts to lower the Trump administration's proposed 25% tariffs on goods from the country. One of Washington's key requests is to ease the restrictions on the imports of US beef that is over 30 months old, but it is raising concerns among cattle industry players and consumers alike. In South Korea, Patrick Falk reports.
In barbecue-loving South Korea, sizzling beef is a staple for many people. Despite thriving domestic production, the country still relies on a significant amount that's imported. It's the world's biggest buyer of beef from the US. Park Jae-hong is head of South Korea's largest wholesale beef market. He says South Korean cuts aren't the same as what's shipped from America.
This side is Korean beef, and this side is imported beef. At first glance, they may look the same, but the taste is dramatically different.
Many people in South Korea believe locally produced beef is superior. Beef imported from the US is more affordable and is often used for marinated dishes, according to some, to mask the flavor. American beef is already set to become more common here thanks to a free trade agreement that will bring tariffs on imports to zero next year. But Washington is urging Seoul to go a step further and to remove an existing block on shipments of beef from cattle that's over 30 months old. Moon Bu-ki is a butcher and specializes in Korean beef. Like many in his line of business, he's concerned about potential upheaval. He says easing controls on US imported beef would push prices down and pressure local vendors. The current restrictions are in place over fears of bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or mad cow disease. That's despite the World Health Organization classifying the US as a negligible risk for it. But it's consumers in South Korea that need convincing.
If Trump demands Korea imports beef that's over 30 months old, the cattle people fear may carry mad cow disease. I'm not sure if we can resist as firmly as we did in the past. But if it happens, I will do my research as a consumer. I'll scrutinize the information closely. If it's scientifically proven safe, I might decide to buy it and eat it.
In 2008, tens of thousands of people protested over the lifting of an import ban on American beef. It remains a sensitive issue in the country. Washington says the current restrictions are unfair. But experts like Kim Song-hun, who's a professor of agricultural economics at Chungnam National University, says its push now to lift limits on beef that's currently banned is a risky move. Consumer anxiety over US beef may increase, he says, and shoppers may avoid it in supermarkets because of safety fears. But the government is signaling it may be willing to budge and address so-called non-tariff barriers to the market. Policymakers say strategic decisions are needed for a broad trade agreement. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya.
Now we're turning our attention to e-scooters. They have soared in popularity around the world, but the rise in the number of accidents due to misuse and even deaths has reignited a debate about how safe they really are. And some are even calling for a complete ban on the vehicles. To chat about this, Michael and Wissam. First of all, Michael, what do you make of this? A ban completely on e-scooters?
So I would be for the ban completely. And I would say that because I live in Dubai and I've been here for a long time. And these guys, and I don't want to sound like the old man yelling, "Get off my lawn," but I'm going to sound like that. These guys can fly at pretty good speeds. And I know that there are certain areas in town where there are marks, lanes on the sidewalk, the pavement, where these guys should be driving or where I should be walking. And when you come across the intersection between the pedestrian and the person on the e-scooter, it's like you're driving. You're constantly taking a quick look over your shoulder to make sure that you can cross over, because Khaleej Times reported today that in the first half of this year, there have been 13 deaths related to e-scooter accidents, whereas last year, in all 12 months, there were 10 deaths. So the number of fatalities has gone up an awful lot for a city that doesn't have a lot of pedestrian traffic, but is having a lot more scooter traffic.
Do you have one? Do you have an electric scooter?
I do not.
Okay, but do you have a bike?
I do not.
Because I would argue that deaths from bikes are also on the up as well. So there is the argument that it's a death on the road situation that is up.
So yes, but bicyclists or cyclists now have a better understanding about being on the road, and I think motorists also as well. And when there is a cyclist you're not going to be able to accelerate at a great speed. There is a rhythm to the way in which you cycle as the traffic moves along. Whereas with a scooter, they will cut in and out of traffic. They'll go on the sidewalk, they'll go off the sidewalk, and they can accelerate quite quickly.
And they can be modified as well, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Wissam, it's an issue pretty much everywhere at this stage. They are on every single road. You can't move without seeing somebody on either public transport versions of these that are operated by a central carrier or by people's own personal scooters. They're causing issues worldwide, it seems.
It's one of the most complicated and interesting stories in the world right now. So from one side, you have one technology or one mode of transportation that is really changing the world, that is giving a way to move for people who don't have means to move or to buy cars. In Dubai itself, we have seen workers and people on the lower side of the spectrum, of the economic spectrum, who have been able to move, to take the metro of somewhere that is a little bit further away from the way they live. And yes, it's dangerous. And yes, I am, as a driver who has been living in Dubai for 20 years, I was so upset to see all those people. But this chaos kind of reminds me of footage we have seen of the beginning of the 20th century, where cars themselves were driving in such chaotic way. So you cannot stop change. Now, okay, there is a regulation that is stopping scooters. But this is about urban mobility. This is about fulfilling somehow the dream of not having to use cars to move inside cities that are supposed to be greener. So let's not forget that this is what it's all about in the first place. Now there is chaos. There has been a lot of accidents, a lot of death. But let me ask a question. What did cause more death, scooters or the delivery, motorcycles? In Dubai itself, I would say delivery motorcycles were much, much more dangerous. And yet we didn't see, we cannot stop those because the economic system is so dependent on them. I think we will need to regulate this. It's a game of power. It's a hierarchy of power on the street. When I go to Paris, I know that cyclists are those who have the power over those in the cars, and cyclists are the people who are the mean people. Apparently, in some parts of the world, like the Middle East, the power remains in the hand of people who drive cars.
And I think, like you said as well, Wissam, we have to move forward. In the 1850s, there was famously a newspaper article that covered that the penny farthing was going to cause many, many deaths because that bicycle was seen to be too dangerous to be on public roads. And obviously that was the modern technology of the time. So we move forward from bicycles, but now we have, and I would refer to them as somewhat of a silent killer because we do know that these things operate without anybody. There is no bell normally on board with a lot of these. It can be a bit of a tricky situation, Michael, but a benefit for people, as Wissam said, from a lower socioeconomic background who may not have the facilities to have a car or to have access to public transport.
I would also say that if you have to go to the 1850s to make your argument is not going to be
too far.
It's not going to be strong. Yes, look, I think there's an equalizing aspect to it when you have something that is so inexpensive that people at the lower end are able to then, be at the same level as somebody who is maybe doing much better. But I think that there are cities around the world where they're walking cities and they're designed that way. Public transportation is usually not that expensive, no matter what your salary is. And I do think that the issue, at least in the city where I live, is that the laws are there to regulate the way that people drive and to make sure people are aware. But the problem is the enforcement or the lack of enforcement. And I don't know if that means that there needs to be more scooter police out there or if there needs to be a different way to monitor the situation. But if you're not going to ban it, and I think that ship has sailed, and I don't think that will happen, but I do think you have to take a fresh look, because if you have already more than the number of deaths in 12 months, you have that in 6 months, I think there's a real issue.
Yeah, I think it may be maybe a stretch too far for some cities to be able to invest in a specifically police force for the scooters. But I do think, and Wissam, as you said there as well, I think what is the solution? Do you think it needs to be a police force who are specifically targeting just scooter riders?
I guess it's different in every single city. Some cities in the Gulf, like Dubai, it's the design, the urban design is so wild, and it's so fast. So having regulations for smaller ways of transportation like scooters is much more difficult. But let's also hope that any kind of new regulations will take into consideration giving the people more ability to move personally, to have better urban, movability. And let's wait for the air hovers to arrive. Let's wait for the ultimate chaos that is coming in the next 5
Do you have, Wissam, do you have a scooter? The points you're getting across indicate that you may be a scooter owner.
I had a scooter, but mostly I have people in my teams who use scooters on daily basis, especially even in Dubai. People who lived in the marina who used to come to the media city on their scooters. And yes, I have 2 of my team members who have had accidents because of scooters. And one of them just left this option in his life. Yes, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. As a driver, I don't like scooters, but I cannot but accept the fact that it is giving a lot of people a lot of means to have, better urban, mobility.
Well,
and yes, we'll have to see what will come in the future. It's only the beginning.
I think it's safe to say, regardless of what we see in the future, one of those things will not be Michael Jabri-Pickett on a scooter. I think it's safe to say that. And finally, we've reached the point in the show where Wissam and Michael...
on a Harley Davidson.
Yeah, more likely. Wissam and Michael, you've come up with some stories, quirky stories of the day. Michael, we'll pass to you first. And this is an out-of-this-world auction.
It truly is, and it is a opportunity to own a piece of Mars. So Sotheby's will be holding an auction on Wednesday. This is an opportunity to own a 54-pound piece of rock. Now, this was blown off the surface of Mars through a massive asteroid strike. It then traveled 140 million miles and landed in the Sahara. And it was discovered in 2023. And it represents, this is the number that I like, it represents 7% of all Martian material that is on Earth.
Wow.
It is 70% bigger than the last biggest piece of Mars, and Sotheby's estimates that it will sell for between $2 and $4 million on Wednesday.
2 to 4 million. So I know that they've compared it and contrasted, because initially I saw this and thought, I've seen rocks like this. Surely I'll just contact Sotheby's and say I have a piece of Mars. They've compared and contrasted it to a piece that they took from 1968 from the Martian surface. So this is the genuine real deal, and we know that for sure, right?
Yes, correct.
You're not going to sink in 2 to 3 million pounds and then discover that you've actually just got a really rather pretty rock, right?
Well, it might be a pretty rock, but I think then you could, you'd have a claim to go back to Sotheby's to say, I challenge the assertion that this is a piece of Mars.
I could think of better ways to spend the cash, but I certainly, as a space geek, I enjoy the story nonetheless. Wissam, yours is about the big football match and Trump's attendance at this game, which has caused a bit of a stir.
It's one of the typical Trump moments, but it's a very nice story. You have Chelsea club who just won the World Cup of, football clubs championship. And it is happening in America, in New Jersey. They just won, and it's that very moment when the American president will have to deliver the trophy and just disappear to let the people who just won have their moment. And then this moment came. It is the most prominent moment of all. It's the moment of victory. And Trump finds himself very close to the center of the story. And he is, as we all know Trump, he is someone who loves this attention and who loves being the center of the story. And instead of just delivering the trophy and leaving, he stayed there. Yeah. And it was a bit awkward, a bit weird. And people were asking, are you going to stay here? Are you going to leave? And he just said, yes, I'm staying. And he stayed. And this is one of those Trump moments. Trump was always able to change any story to make it about him.
Every story can be a Trump story if you give it enough time, I think, Wissam. That's what it is. Never misses a photo op. And there was Salt Bay vibes, I think, with that, when Salt Bay got with the Champions League trophy and then got banned from the matches. But apparently Trump will be allowed back into the stadium in the near future, as they will be the co-host for the Men's World Cup in 2026, along with Mexico and Canada. To both of you, thank you so much. That is unfortunately all we have time for today. But a massive thank you to our guests, Al Arabiya editor, to Wissam Keyrouz, thank you. And the managing director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett. Thank you both for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and as always, you can follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess Watson is coming up next. Goodbye.